And we're back. So this chapter is about Henry Ford and how he developed or how he utilized the process flowchart to develop some things that we still use today, like tractors and vehicles and the assembly line. Um, I think this is one of my favorite chapters. It is a little dry, but if somebody was to ask me, what is one thing I can do that'll benefit me today? Process flowchart would probably be my answer because it can help you identify a lot of redundancy, a lot of mistakes, bottlenecks, errors. It can help you identify a lot of shit that can fix a lot of problems really quick. And usually it's as simple as, we have two people doing the same job or something like that, that you can make a change really fast. So, without further ado, let's talk about processing. So, if I can figure out how to change slides here. All right. Plan of attack today, we will talk about the battlefield today, what processing looks like or doesn't look like. Then we'll talk about Henry Ford and how he used process flowcharting to increase efficiency. Enemy mistakes are things that we see a lot of people in the market do that could be easily mitigated using this type of tool. Then the strategic cheat codes, we'll take what we learned from Henry Ford and we'll apply it to your business. And then we'll tell you how to make it operational with a couple different ways to get started. So, to open this up, I used to do this with my class, and I wanted to pick a process that everybody can relate to. And so, everybody, one way or another, has to wake up in the morning, right? For me,
Um,
it's a giant pain in the ass because I've got two little boys that I have to get ready. And so, I was trying to figure out how I could be more efficient in the morning and get everything done. Um, So I started off with I have to turn off my alarm because it goes off, it wakes me up, and then I have to turn it off, right? Well, there's a couple things you can take from that. I have to have an alarm first. So those are your tools. I have to set the alarm. There's a process that can go into that. And there's a process to turn it off, or more than likely, I've hit snooze 5 times, which all has separate processes. And if I were to truly map this out, I did this really quick and tried to keep it very simple for the point of discussion, not to go through the entire exercise, but all of those would have separate processes that would bleed into turning off the alarm. Then I have to shower and get ready, which is a whole process in itself, right? So, I mean, I can't put on my pants and then go hop in the shower, right? It doesn't work like that. I can't do my hair and then, then try to put my shirt on. So the point is, you have to be very particular about the order in which things happen because eventually, hopefully, you're hiring people on and they don't know exactly how to do what you do. So this is a great way to be able to explain it to them and make sure the process gets copied the same way every single time. And then the chaos happens. Then I have to get my boys up and get them ready. So there's a lot of things that have to happen in there, and it's a chaos. And by using this, I can break down the steps of what it takes to get them ready. I can figure out the points that are the biggest problems, like find your shoes. Why is that the most difficult one? I have no idea. This morning, he was sitting on a shoe and said he couldn't find it. So I can figure out, because that's one of the bottlenecks that we always run into, I can figure out a fix for that. Put your shoes in the same place every single time. Um, then I have to drop off my boys and they have to go to two different places. So I have to figure out, okay, does it make more sense to go to point A first or point B first? And through this process, I can figure that out. I can time them. I can do a lot of things to figure out which one has to happen in what order. And then I come back and I hop on here and talk to you good people. So that is my morning routine. And if I wanted, I could use this in a lot of different ways. I can use it to find places that I'm wasting time, like hitting the snooze button 50 times. I'm notorious for it, or just shutting off my alarm and forgetting to hit the snooze button. And so I can build in ways to mitigate that, or I can use this to understand how detrimental that can actually be to my entire morning flow. I can use it to find redundancies. If we're putting the shoes in the same place every time, then I've just got to tell them to go get the shoes in the same place, and I don't have to continue to repeat. Bud, find your shoes. Hey, can you find your shoes? Hey, you're sitting on your damn shoe. Can you just put it on? So there's a lot of ways.
Frustrating moment, right?
Yeah.
He was sitting on it this morning.
Trust me, as they get old, you'll have more difficulties in shoes.
Yeah, I get it. um, See, there's a whole bunch of stuff that sometimes it's kind of the forest through the trees type of environment where you can't necessarily figure out what's going wrong with your business until you just map it out. And this helps you take. This is actually Jocko Willnick's one of his sayings is take a step back and focus at it at a bigger angle. Um, so moving on. Um, One of the things that I think gets people in a lot of trouble is the hustle mentality, which I think is great. And there's all sorts of people out there, Grant Cardone talks about it. Who's the gym guy? I like him a lot, and I can't think of his name.
Jim,
Long hair, always wears the nose thing. Either way, he's probably one of the most realistic people out there, but even he's like, it's just a grind all day, every day. And while that's great, you can be busy and you can be busy but unproductive. And so with this, it can help you put it into perspective and help you become both busy and productive. Most teams, it's very rare that I run into somebody that's not a Fortune 500 company that has a flow chart. And this is something I think everybody needs to have, whether you're a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, a vet. I think it's something that you should look at and review on a regular basis to make sure, because using this, you can make sure that your team and everything that you're doing stays in line with your brand. It's helping achieve the goals that you want to achieve. It can cut out redundancies. It can do a lot of things. I think I've said that now a lot of times. So talk about redundancies. You can review every delay, every redundancy, and every quick fix. So a lot of times we're moving so fast, we try to put a Band-Aid on something and we never come back around to it. And then that ends up becoming just the process. And it was never done correctly from the beginning, but now you can have a chance to identify it and go back to it. That's a lot of the reason why we always done it that way is one of my least favorite comments ever.
It is the worst. I
mhm.
abhor.
Oh, shoot. Give me 1 second. Somebody's at my house. Annoying.
Yeah, you bought a lie, everybody.
Exactly. But I do think, Clayton, I think we've probably both seen redundancies in businesses, whether that's their marketing plan, and it's like, okay, if Susie's doing this, then Johnny doesn't need to, unless you don't trust the work that they're doing. So there's a level of trust that has to be built out in your processes as well,
Yeah.
to mitigate and minimize those redundancies.
Yeah, I'm experiencing that one of my clients now is just that there's some people everybody's got their hands in the soup, and rather than one person that has the responsibility for that function to carry it all the way to the end, it gets done partially, passed off to somebody else, and then passed back to that individual. And yeah, it's not fluid flowing, which is difficult. And particularly you're dealing with a company that thinks they're doing okay, and
Right.
and they're making all kinds of money, but if they're getting ready to sell, which this particular company is, are you efficient enough when someone looks at your books and looks at your flow? They're going to say there needs to be something, it's going to devalue. So I think that's my focus, is really helping them get to their valuation, what they want to be at. But
Yeah.
most VCs, and they're looking at venture capitalists, really not looking at people in the space. They're looking at the dollars generated in that space, and then they'll keep someone on to manage it for a period of time. But yeah,
Well, I think when you, especially, I mean, if you're talking about processes and everything, and if you've merged companies, like you see this a lot, like they'll keep the redundancy on for both companies. They'll keep them on for a brief period until they realize they actually do, this person actually handles and does the process continuously and consistently, whereas the other person is just like, oh, let's go try this.
right.
They're sort of following the process and the procedures, but they tend to fly off and figure out kind of what's working best at the given time, and so that person's the one that tends to be let go because they're not following the process that the VC is thinking is
Well,
actually going to help land that.
Even when they track the process, they don't take a step back and look at the process. They may look at so many calls were made, or so many people showed up, but they really don't look at, is this the most efficient process? In the world of AI, should we have a chatbot on a screen? And it's just it's like I said, it's getting them to, like Rob called it. I call it that 10,000 foot view of everything. But it's well, Rob, we just had some filler time while you were gone, so
Sorry about that. Hope
very,
your editor
very valuable filler time, I might add.
All right, so we were at Ford proved how this works. We'll go into his story in the next slide, but just trust me for now. But also, okay, so how does a credit analyst look at your process? And I like to explain this by talking about franchising, because I get a lot of questions about how can I turn my business into a franchise? Well, you got to understand that there's really 3, maybe 4 things that you get when you buy a franchise. And I have bought a franchise. So the first thing you get is branding and brand recognition. If you're buying a big national brand, then you get their big national marketing campaigns and stuff like that. Usually you get some sort of marketing help in there too. But really the thing you buy when you buy a franchise is their process. And they should have, the good ones, have already built out an entire process, whether that's you're buying a system, like when I bought Stretch Lab, they had an entire system dedicated to training the flexologist. I couldn't have trained them, so they figured that out. Or usually it's a CRM type system where they have processes and procedures for adding clients, taking care of them, and things like that. So it creates a lot of value for your business. And on top of that, when an analyst is reviewing it to determine if you're credible or not, he's going to look at your processes to see, are you actually capable of handling the things that you're doing? So it ties back into your brand. Are you staying consistent with your brand? If you're somebody who says, we value our people, but you overload them with activities and there's a lot of burnout, then you're not staying consistent with your brand. If you talk about efficiency, which a lot of people do, but you have an antiquated system, then you're not on brand. So your branding really, you should check every process that you create against your brand to make sure that it's staying all in line. All right, so Henry Ford. I read his autobiography, and there's a lot of bad things about Henry Ford as well. So I'm not trying to hype him up as this, perfect person, because nobody is. But the thing I found most fascinating about him is every chapter he was basically doing a mental process flow chart. And that led to inventions like the tractor, the vehicle, the assembly line. Everything he did, or every chapter that he wrote in that book, was really just a process, the way that he thought. And so the story starts off with him inheriting a farm, his family farm, and he hated farming because it's a lot of work. And he found that it was very inefficient. And he went to the point of he pulled every tool out of his barn and laid it all out and created processes for each step along the way, whether it was plowing the field, sowing the seed, or harvesting. And what he found was that the two biggest bottlenecks in that process was plowing the field and then moving the product, whether that was grain or seed or whatever it was, to the co-op for sale. And so to fix those,
People, we need to keep in mind this is 1879. This
yes,
is not modern farming today where you have the use of tractors and semis to haul your grain or whatever.
he
You're
literally invented the tractor. It didn't exist before him.
exactly, exactly.
Wow, that's
Uh,
really old.
yeah, what was it like in those days, Clayton?
Yeah.
Um, so the reason that we have vehicles today is because Henry Ford was tired of driving his horse and buggy to the co-op. And it was through his mental process mapping that he determined if he built a vehicle, engines existed at this time, but the vehicle didn't. He figured out how much more money he could make by increasing the efficiency of moving the product to the co-op. Then he continued that on. So he's the grandfather of the assembly line, and that was really just him creating a process flow chart and figuring out how it all worked together and how to move things along more efficiently that created that process, the assembly line. And then every single thing he did after that was done in the exact same manner. So enemy mistakes, these are the things that we see people do a lot in modern day business.
So just going to comment quickly. Not only enemy mistakes, but this could be things that we are doing currently ourselves wrong right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of not having a process, and I run around frantically all day trying to figure out what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
For one of my business, well, for most of my businesses now, I did do this for Stretch Lab, and I'll use some examples from there because it really helped fix a lot of problems. But most businesses make the mistake of thinking motion is progress. We talked about this earlier, that everything is just chaos all day, and it's because they don't have this step done. And when things come up and things aren't getting done fast enough, our initial reaction is just to hire more people. But if you review a lot of P&Ls, you know that salaries are the most expensive thing on your budget list. So if you do this, you can be careful how I say this. You can probably find people that may or may not fit into the system, or that there's better ways to approach it where maybe you don't have to hire a new person to get things done because you can automate the process.
Yeah,
Funny
I think
story.
culture fit, right?
Do
Like
what?
sometimes we just hire somebody because they can do the job, but they're a terrible culture fit.
Yep.
I see that a lot in the businesses that I work with, and it's like there are a ton of people out there that can do this job that would be a better fit for your brand
Right.
and your company.
Funny story. I was actually taking management information systems in college at OU, and our professor was hired to consult for OU. So this was 2008, 9, somewhere in there. And he did a process flow chart, and he found one lady that had been working there since the 70s. And her job was to take like the triplicate forms and file the triplicate forms away. Well, at some point in like the 80s or 90s, they moved it to online, and nobody knew that she was still working there.
Oh my
So
God.
for like 20 years, she'd been collecting a paycheck, doing absolutely nothing.
I mean, but how many people stay in those jobs like that
Exactly.
really are not doing a job? They're just like, I'll see how I get paid until
Yep.
somebody tells me what to do. And it's like, well, you don't have a process. Like,
Yep.
that's why these people get lost in the system of you're paying for somebody just sitting there watching Netflix or reading a book or
Hmm.
Sudoku or crossword.
Yeah, in big companies that happens a lot.
And yeah.
Um, all right. They so people are, because of this grinded out type of environment that we live in, people are really good at staying busy, and it's not that you're not doing stuff, it's just could your time and effort be allocated to something else that is going to make a bigger impact. Um, I worked with an automation specialist to create some marketing campaigns and stuff. The very first thing we did is sit down and do a process flow chart so he could see exactly what I did, when I did it, how I did it. And then he went back and created automated systems to help mitigate my time.
Oh, wow.
Um, so all of that, the consistent hustle, the consistent chaos, that leads to burnout really fast. Mindy, you have a lot more experience on the HR side of things. How often do you see burnout as a reason that people leave?
Well, I think it's a pretty high one. It's more and burnout speaks to misalignment of values, right? And so it's definitely more that misalignment of values than it is burnout, but they don't know what else to call it. And they don't enjoy going to work every day. They're getting really tired of the grind and the hustle because of the chaos. And so if there were systems put in place, it would be so much better.
I'll, so a personal story. When I owned Stretch Lab, I had a manager who I thought she was great, but she kept telling me I've got too much to do and I can't get it all done in one day. And I remember thinking, all right,
Yeah, as a
is
boss,
that
you don't like that. Like, really? You're too
right?
busy. Come on.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm
you're
actually
checking
going
your
to
phone
say
right now, so all right.
Stop watching Netflix.
So it took me a while to be like, all right, let's actually dive into this, because she was talking about leaving. She was saying that she was burned out, that she was going home irritated every day. And so we sat down and we created a process for her. We went from step one, okay, this is what you do when you walk in today, and this is what you do before you leave. And I found out, we started writing everything down that she did, and come to find out, she did do way more than I had realized that we put on her. And so she was absolutely correct. Um, so we took what she did, we kept the things that she was good at and that she liked to do, and we took the things that she didn't like to do and that she wasn't the best at, and we created a new position. And we used those things that we took away from her and use that as a job description to hire somebody else new. And that ended up making the biggest difference. Still didn't save the company, but it showed her that I really did appreciate her. It showed me how much we had put on her unknowingly, because we'd have our meetings and we'd say, okay, this isn't working. How do we fix it? And of course, she was the first one to say, oh, I can take that on, not realizing every single time it was just adding more stuff to it.
Yeah. I think that's sometimes it's great when you can actually create new positions from that. However, there's other times where that's not an option. And so you really do kind of have to go back and evaluate what are the job requirements or what is the job description for that role, and then figure out, okay, if you have another employee that should be doing half of these things, are they not doing their job? And so it becomes a little bit of analysis of what, your team is doing. But at the same time, it also, I think, Rob, where you were leading with this was like, it actually helps you create better job descriptions for people. And I've seen that time and again as well. Clayton, I mean, you've been in HR as well, and having clinics. So did you see this a lot?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's another whole topic. I think about someone not being a good match for the company, and in what I found out was when someone you don't address the issue, not only does your management team or you see the issue with the individual, but when the employees start seeing that individual or individuals aren't a good match for the company, and they may not be doing their jobs as the most efficient, rather than I've experienced, rather than people trying to lift them up to them, they've lowered their expectations. They've lowered their quality of work as well. So because they feel that they're getting away with something, But it becomes a real issue if you don't have, if you don't address issues with people, uh, with a process these days as well, because, even though we're all pretty much hire and fire at will states, you still have to progressive discipline. And by having a system like Rob's showing us, it does have something to fall back on. But the big, like I said, but that's another whole topic I think we do down the road, is how do you implement that?
Yeah. Rob, you're on mute.
My back.
You're
Yep.
back.
All right. All right. So the cheat code that we can learn from Henry Ford's story. Map out every step before you want to move faster. So when we did the original survey for what people wanted to learn, it was they wanted to learn how to increase sales, which is great. We could all use more money, right? But then it begs the question, like, okay, do you really need more sales, or do you need to fix your process? Or if you bring in more sales, do you have a good enough process to fulfill more orders? I've used the example a lot of the client that I had that I actually took the meeting under the assumption that he needed to increase sales. And that actually wasn't his problem at all. In fact, he was having a supply chain issue. And so my pitch was to help him increase sales. And it bombed because that actually didn't help, actually made things a lot worse. So sometimes I run into a lot of companies that have maybe unexpected growth, and they're trying to figure out how to adjust and how to move forward. And it's the solutions going back to the process and
Yeah.
figuring out, okay, you've got a lot more volume coming in now. What steps do you need to take to keep up with it?
Well, and I think there's people that, I have thrown recommendations to, or connections to, right? And they've connected, and then it's like you don't call them back because you can't handle that workload. And so, building the flow and mapping it out so that you understand what growth can look like and what you need to make that, successful with that growth. I mean, it's much needed.
Yes. And if you go back through your process, maybe you can figure out how to be more efficient so you can take on a bigger workload.
Yeah.
And the reason, so originally I didn't like, we sat here and talked about this for a second because I didn't like map out every step. But Mindy brought up a great point of you don't know what's going on until you put it all out there. And so while mapping out every single step sounds overwhelming, and it probably is, what it can help you do is identify all of those steps that go into something and where they could be mitigated or moved to a different process or something to help you fix the issue or create a better process or automate it, something like that. So it actually really is important to map out every single thing and then go back to it and then start cutting things out.
Well, I know I've had to, when I worked for a company, they really didn't have any idea what I did. And so it was like, okay, let me just write it down for you. And they were like, no, you don't do all that. And I'm like, no, I'm doing two jobs. I have two titles, and this is what it looks like
Mm-hmm.
for a 24-hour period.
Yep.
But because they just assumed this is what I did, like sometimes we really don't know what our people are doing, and we do need them to write it down. We need to understand how they're spending their time.
Uh,
Back to manager or whatever
and
stretch
on
line.
that point, maybe I don't want to dive too far into this because I don't think we have a lot of. I think the majority of the people watching this are going to be solopreneurs. But if you have an employee that you don't know what they do, how are you ever going to replace them if something were to happen? You know, they leave, whatever. It doesn't have to be a bad thing, but then they're just gone. And what do you do?
Yeah. But I mean, even if we're not talking employee, what's your succession plan,
Mhm.
right? If your processes aren't documented, you can't sell your company because nobody, like, what are they buying? They have no idea.
Yes.
So there's got to be written processes.
Clayton and I have had that conversation with a few times now of, okay, you want to sell your business. What are you selling?
Right.
So,
Well, I think getting back
Um,
to the employee thing really quickly is sometimes roles change and or employees leave and you give somebody else a different assignment or and many times the assumption just because the job title says X, they may not be performing at that level because someone may have taken on a similar responsibility. So I think that review of people's roles and functions is very extremely important.
exactly. Um, all right, then we want to talk about design the process once and repeat it forever. And Mindy had a really good point about this of you want to design a process that is in line with your brand. And once it's in line with your brand, there are things that you can do to automate, to mitigate problems or risks or something like that. But the initial thing should stay the same, stay consistent with your brand and everything else for the long haul. Um, and even if you have to change something eventually, then you have to go back to the beginning of, okay, how does this fit into the entire process? Did I explain that the way you explained it really well earlier? Maybe I should have just let you do it.
So the whole idea is about building a flow. Like if you're going to add horsepower, you're adding gas to the pedal, right?
Oh yeah,
And so
carburetor.
if you're doing that, the flow has to be set. Your strategy has to be set. Your processes need to be set before you add marketing, which is the fuel. It's the gas to bring business into your door. So you want to make sure those are all set and aligned and your brand is speaking that value before you can really push your marketing to a higher level.
Yeah, we use the analogy of a carburetor. That's right. And so, if for somebody who's not a gearhead, a carburetor is the central part that combines fuel, air, and fire to make your engine go, right? And if it's out of balance, if you have too much fuel, then it just shoots out the tailpipes or it floods your carburetor. So you can't do that. So you have to make sure that there's enough air to for the fire to ignite. And so if you've got too much coming in, the gas, as Mindy put it, and you don't have enough air, then you just flood everything out and nothing works right. So you have to find the right equilibrium.
Man, look at us. We're using big words today.
I told you I was going to forget to bring that up, and I really liked it.
So really the idea really is to design the process once and repeat it forever because that becomes your reputation. Repetition begets
Repetition.
reputation. So,
Yep.
and we spoke of that a couple weeks ago with marketing
Yep.
and
Yeah.
brand.
And I just want to add, the folks that watching, both Mindy and Rob are expertise in this area of helping you walk through the processes. So just as a plug for them, because they've been through this with a couple of companies before, less than I have, but I will be using some of these formulas. So, thank you.
Um, then you want to, so once you get it all mapped out and you understand what each process looks like, then you want to fix the handoff. So there's a lot of time. Think of the assembly line. Like the whole idea was that I build one piece and then I send it to the next guy who builds the next piece, right? You want to make sure that handoff is well documented, and whether you have to build in checks and balances or however that next person or next process has to take ownership, you need to make sure that's documented. Because if you have a lot of leaks, then you're going to lose profit. So if I create a document and I send it on and I send it to nobody, then I've just wasted a lot of time, right? So somebody on the other, if my process is to send an email, I need to make sure that either their process is, maybe it's just hit reply, got it, or we have checks and balances where we have like an actual checkbox, which I did do at Stretch Lab. I had a sheet of, okay, after you do this, make sure you check it off. We had an issue with people not cleaning the bathroom, so we delegated it, and they had to, we put their name on whose day it was to clean the bathroom. Then we had all of the check boxes of what they had to do when they cleaned the bathroom, and they had to go through and check it. So,
I was just thinking that because you go to a restaurant and there's the checklist on
yes,
the
Right.
door, maybe right there. somewhere around the
And,
door that
and please
did you do
wash
all
your hands before you go back to work.
that? Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
I mean, our entire brand was built trying to reach high level people, and you can't have that with a shitty bathroom.
Right.
So, if I walked in and the bathroom was still dirty, I could go back and see whose job it was, and not just to be a
A nice
stick
guy.
in, huh?
A nice guy.
Well, I was actually looking for the
I,
opposite.
I know.
It wasn't just to be a micromanager. It was, okay, maybe there's another issue there. So it's an opportunity to look at the process. Maybe we ran out of cleaner or something and I didn't know. And whoever it was might be new and was afraid to say they didn't have cleaner. So it's not just a way to micromanage, it's a way to make sure other problems aren't the root of the issue. Okay, so we talked about map every step, and we talked about how that can be overwhelming. So once you get it all out, then you can go back and start consolidating things. Maybe you don't have to, hitting send on the email, while important, doesn't always necessarily have to be written out in the process, right? It's something that can be understood, depending on who you're sending this to.
That's key though. I mean, that's why a lot of large companies, like, that is a line item in
Yes.
their SOP. It's like push send. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's not a logical thing. Like, it's duh, everybody should do that. But some people are like, well, I drafted it. Well, did you actually send? I mean, at the same time though, I've been guilty of like drafting a response and hit send and it didn't send, because
Right.
that happens too. Or a
Uh,
text.
Going back to our marketing of know your customer, this is also, I mean, you're doing a very similar thing. You're creating marketing in a certain context that somebody else is going to read. So you have to think of who you're writing this for. If you're writing it for yourself and you think you don't need the send button on there, then maybe you can leave it off. But if you're writing it for my grandpa who didn't grow up with email, then having that send on there is probably really important.
Well, and depending upon what your procedures and your processes are, pictures work well too.
Yeah.
Screenshots of, especially if it's highly technical or, computer based, screenshots can relay the same message,
Yep.
with arrows that say number one, then number two, and number three.
I've seen
That works
AI
well.
platforms that do that, where like you record a video
Mhm.
of the process and it'll take screenshots and help you write the entire thing. I forgot
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
So, um, where were we? Oh, to get to the point, maybe send isn't important. Maybe it is, but you want to really use the 80-20 principle on this. So the 80-20 principle is 80% of the outcomes are derivatives of the 20% of effort that you put into it. And usually your processes are the same thing. There's usually 20% of your processes that lead to 80% of your output. And so I like to backtrack what we're trying to do. I like reverse math. So I will come up with the goal that we're trying to fix. And then, okay, well, how do we get to that? So if it's fulfillment's an issue, okay, where does that product come from? Where does the purchase order come from? And then I just keep backtracking it until I find the actual problem. But my point is, keep it simple, because if you're trying to explain this to other people, you don't want them to get bogged down in very little detail. You want them to be able to remember it and reproduce it. All right. Moving on. Debriefing. All right. So how do we actually make this operational? And I remember I did this lecture with Rochelle, who is a professional. This is what she does for a living for a very large firm. And Michael Morrison, who you guys know, who utilizes this a lot in his consulting. And the question was asked, where do you start? And we all hem-hawed around it for like 30 minutes before I finally said, I think it's less important about where you start and more important about just getting started. Because if you do it right, it should all circle back around at some point. But what I would tell you to do is find one process that you want to work on. Like I said, I identify a problem and then I will reverse math on how I got there, right? But if I'm starting this from scratch and we're not necessarily trying to fix a problem, we're just trying to understand a business, I usually start with the sales process because everything ends up tying into it. You know, if you're even if you're a building widgets and you have fulfillment, well, your sales process, you're going to have to fulfill that order somewhere. So if you keep asking questions and drill down into, okay, now I've got to ship the order out, but where does the product actually come from? How does it go from the assembly line here? Then you're going to eventually work your way back into that too. Did that make sense?
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean,
Yeah,
because it's a whole thing,
Right.
from the end back to the beginning. And so if you don't understand what the end, you got to have the end in mind, right?
Yeah.
Like there's some saying, which I can't remember. It just went,
That's it. Have the end in mind. That's Covey, Stephen Covey,
yeah.
Seven Habits of Highly
So,
Effective People.
yeah. So if you don't understand what the end goal is, you can't even create the process.
Right. That's a good point. So pick your one process. Like I said, I like to start with sales, and I'll show you what that looks like here in a minute. Map every step, get every single thing out there. Even if you think it's very little, create a step for it because it either may become more important later on, or you can just consolidate it into something else and move on from there. But if you don't write it down and you completely miss it, then you're going to be coming back to this process scenario and trying to figure out where you went wrong.
Right. I think a big one in the sales process a lot of times is if you're selling a new company and let's say your ticket, your product is high ticket, right? So let's say it's over $100,000. Well, if you don't figure credit in that component, like you can't make the sale.
Right.
But a lot of times we forget the credit piece that's going to have to go have its own checks and balances in that. And so credit, that one seems to be forgotten, but it's part of that sales process that you have to look at the whole thing.
And to take it even further, if you created a process where you track why people don't buy your product, then you can go back and see the data on, okay, we had 50% of our clients say they didn't have the cash to do it. And so you can make that educated decision that offering credit is probably going to increase your sales, right?
Yeah.
All right. So no skipping steps, no guessing right at first, write every single thing down, which is time consuming, but I promise you'll be better for it. What's even more time consuming is skipping it and then not realizing what's creating the problem. You got to start all over.
Yeah.
Then you can remove, combine, or automate processes and get rid of irrelevant points. Then build your flow chart and test it constantly. You want to build in checks and balances are very important, and sometimes redundancy is very important. Coming from banking, everything had redundancies built in because we were dealing with a lot of money. And if you didn't have a good checks and balances and you didn't have good redundancy and you make $1 million mistake, somebody's going to jail.
Yeah. And I mean, as a consumer, I want my bank to have redundancy. I want them to have those checks and balances to protect me.
We did talk a lot about removing redundancy. So there's a difference between redundancy that's just wasting time and money and redundancy that's intentionally put into your process. So just to
And
clear that.
ultimately saving you money.
Right. All right, so the tactical takeaways. This is how we actually start building a process flowchart. Going back over it, the reason you do this is because you can't fix what you can't see. So if you start mapping everything out, then you can see where everything lands and what's taking up the most time. Don't start... I like to use the analogy of a starting pitcher in baseball, right? So I think I've said this in a different video. My coach said, if you're a starting pitcher and you've got 9 innings to pitch, what happens a lot is that everybody's real excited at the beginning and they're real excited at the end, and you have this lull between the middle where bad things happen because you're not paying close enough attention. But if you break it down into mentally 3 different 3 inning games and you win each one of the 3 inning games, then eventually you're going to win the game, right?
Yep.
So doing this, the biggest pushback I get from from business owners that haven't done this is, well, I just don't have the time. And I get this. I get that because it does take a lot of time. But if you try to think of your business as a whole, it's so overwhelming. I've tried to do this and it was awful. What works better is picking one process. Just keep it simple, start with the one, and if you've done it right, eventually you're going to branch off into all the other processes that need to happen. Like I said, I start with sales because I think everything ties back into it eventually. But you can start with, if you've got a pressing issue that you need to do, you can start there, whatever. But I suggest starting with sales. Write down exactly what happens. Okay, so I've built out a very basic sales process right here. It starts with lead generation. So lead generation is, where are you finding leads? How are you collecting them? How are you processing them? What does that process look like to go from, okay, either this was a cold call, this was a warm lead, this is a hot lead. Okay, how do I process all of that? Where are those leads coming from? Because remember, in marketing, you want to be able to track where your leads are coming from, which ones close faster, things like that. So in this step, you can build in all of those processes of understanding how to calculate where your leads are coming from, how to calculate your close ratios and things like that. So once I get the lead in, you got to figure out where that goes. Most people use a CRM system to collect the leads. I've got cards all over my desk that I need to build a better process for. So what happened? Where are you collecting those leads? What are you doing with it when they come in? Then you have to make your initial contact. And I'm using my sales method here, which is pretty standard for like a service or something like that. You can take what you want and adapt it if you're selling more of a widget, online type environment or something else. You'll have something completely different. But so once the lead comes in, then I have to contact them somehow, whether that's an email, phone call, appointment set, something. So what does that initial contact look like? Do I have an automated system that they send in a lead generation form and it automatically updates or sends them an email with a calendar invite or something?
So workflow, think funnel, think workflow. Those are the standard terms that you kind of hear thrown around when talking about this specifically.
Yep, exactly. So once I've made the initial contact, then the next step for me is a meeting, whether that's online, in person, or I don't know what else, but yeah, let's do. I'll just leave it there. Edit that part out. But what does that meeting look like? So if it's online, okay, did I send, this is what I never do, but I should build a process for it, is send a calendar invite or send a link to the meeting. So all of that's done and you're not panicking at the last second like I always do, trying to figure out how to send a link to the meeting. Then the close process, and this one might, they're all important, but if you screw up the close process, how many people do you think you lose because you've screwed up the closing process?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
When I was working in sports ticket sales, our process was to collect we would have an invoice and we would collect the credit card number. And this was at the time I couldn't just, plug it in.
Yeah.
And we had to create an order form. And if something happened in that process, then they didn't get their tickets. Actually, this is a good story. The very first time I did this, I had just taken over as the operations manager for the Frisco Rough Riders. And so my job was to maintain the box office and the ticket database. And the very first season that I worked down there, we had so many people that were showing up with duplicate tickets, and we could not figure out what the hell was going on. And in that scenario, it's not like I can just go make more seats. So it was a bad thing, especially if it was during like a sold out game, which happened a lot. It was awful. And so I had to figure out what was going on, and I backtracked everything. Okay, so this is how I did my reverse math. Okay, the customer gets the tickets. How did he get the tickets? Oh, well, we mailed it to him or sent an email, whatever. Okay, who generates the email? Well, I generate the email when the certain order form comes down. Okay, who's collecting the order forms? I had my either I did or one of my assistants did. And then, okay, what happens when we get an order form? Well, you double check it in the system, and you make sure the it's coded correctly so they get the right tickets, and then it goes to mailer. Okay, where do those order forms start? And that was with the sales reps. Okay, I'll stop it there. There's a whole lot more process, but that's enough. So what I found out by going through this, and I sat there, I watched it because we had a bin where we put the order forms. By the way, this was in the days before it was all automated. So we did have paper order forms,
Yes.
and they put them in one bin. Somebody picked them up and collected them, brought them down to the box office where we processed it. There's two people that brought those order forms down and processed it, me and my assistant. Come to find out, I sat there and I watched this process for about a week. Come to find out, my assistant would pick fights with some of the sales reps, and she wouldn't just process the order form; she would try to send it back. So they would have to fix it so they would learn. And she was an older lady, and we ended up having to fire her over this. But it was going through this process of understanding where the bottleneck or where the failure was coming in that I was finally able to fix the situation. And it, eventually ended up, she didn't meet our code of conduct because she did not believe in, the team environment that we were building. She believed in, well, that doesn't matter. So she didn't fit our brand. She had to go. And we found somebody who did fit our brand. All right, so I think I've walked through this enough, right? Does that create clarity?
Yeah, and I mean, I think on your second bullet point, sales is perfect because every delay there kills momentum. I mean, I just experienced, selling my house. And so there's a reason that contracts have like a time period with which you need to respond. Otherwise, it becomes null and void. And so a lot of that, if we think about our solopreneurs, our entrepreneurs, if you're not actively working on your business and being involved in the day-to-day decisions, a lack of a decision is a decision, right? And so there goes that's the bottleneck, because sometimes your people, if you have employees, they're waiting for you to respond, and they're not necessarily coming up to you going, "Hey, Rob, did you get my email? What do you think? I need to get back to so and so." They're just going, "Well, it's on the boss's plate. Like it's been moved up the food chain. I don't know." And it's like, okay, a lack of a decision is a decision in
Yep.
that. And so what message is it going back to your brand values? Is that the strategy that you want? So you kind of need to stay on top of working on your business and get out of the in the business component at times.
Time kills all deals. So if you
Yeah.
don't have processes in place that keeps things moving along, even if it's just a check and balance or a checkpoint, in your
Yeah.
situation, it could just be checking in to make sure things are still moving. If
Mhm.
it's coming close to that deadline, are you writing an addendum to move the deadline, or is there another problem?
Yeah. And I mean, the whole idea of this process piece really is to create clarity around your business.
Yes,
Because I
very
think the
well
last
put.
bullet here is your goal isn't speed, it's clarity. And
Yeah.
having a process should create a lot of clarity around what you're doing.
Yep. So write down exactly what happens. We've already covered that. Don't skip steps because you might miss something that's very important, and it takes a lot more time to backtrack that and figure out where the problem is. Um, One thing that I found that I already talked about the sticky notes on the wall, right? Or was that beforehand?
That
Okay.
was beforehand.
So when I built out the process for Stretch Lab, I had Rochelle helping me, who does this for a very large company. And we were trying to sit down and just write it out. We were trying to build it with PowerPoint, actually. And it was getting so confusing because you kind of add a step and then you got to make sure it works right and you got to draw the lines. And it was just such a pain in the ass. And finally, she heard, I think it was, I need to fact check this, but I think it was Macintosh that started this. Or no, it was IBM. It was IBM. Where instead of trying to create it online first, they would take sticky notes and they would have multiple colors of sticky notes. And so, like, I have 5 different points here, right? Each point would have a different color. And so, if it's part of the lead generation process, then all of those sticky notes would be the same color. What I found was when we were talking through it, there was a lot of times it'd be like, oh, that's definitely lead generation. And then as we keep talking, be like, oh no, that's actually an initial contact process. And so we were moving it around all the time, or oh, that process actually that's what we need to fix. Okay, so then you can start removing the sticky notes. But there's a saying that I love, like, don't let technology get in the way. So by doing it with sticky notes on the wall, and I've got pictures of it because I thought it was so fascinating. It's lived on my wall for a long time. By doing the sticky notes, I removed that barrier of, okay, I'm not, PowerPoint's got its own, it's great for what it is, but it wasn't necessarily designed to do this. And so there's quirks with it. It removed all of those excuses and it made things so much easier. So I highly encourage you, if you're going to start doing this, build it out with sticky notes on your wall before you start putting it into a system. Then once it's all laid out, take a step back. This is actually something Jocko Willink talks a lot about in his books. Is it's so hard sometimes to make a decision when you're too close to the situation. Get it all out, go take a nap, go to bed, do whatever, and then come back and look at it again and make sure that it still makes sense. Have somebody else look at it. Do something to where you're taking a step back and taking a wider angle view of it. Um,
I think to that point, we've all probably sent that email before when we weren't in the best frame of mind, and it's come back to bite us in the ass. So, very similar to that.
yeah.
Like, throw it out there, then don't press send. Step back, come back the next morning, and then go, okay,
Yeah.
am I still passionate? Okay, let's let that wait just a little bit longer.
Maybe I don't need to use such abrasive language in that.
Yeah. Or
Maybe
maybe I don't need to send this an email. Maybe I need to go talk to them and go, okay, let's discuss this.
yes. All right. So Ford did this all the time. If you read his autobiography, every single decision he makes has a process to it. And that's eventually how he became one of the most recognized names in the world at this point. So, and you said this earlier, your goal isn't speed, it's clarity. So I think that's a fantastic point. Um, okay, so now we've been through step one. We got our one process. It's in our sticky notes and it's on the wall. What do you do next? Next, you should try to put it into some sort of digital format if sharing it is your goal. Um, like I said, I use PowerPoint. PowerPoint's great for this. A lot of people have access to PowerPoint. It doesn't necessarily have to be much more complicated than that unless you've got a huge, long, complicated process. And if you do, there are other tools that are more suited for a big, long process. Lucid Chart, I've actually paid for and used, and it's great. There is a little bit of a learning curve to these things, so it really has to be worth the investment for you to put it in. And now AI has a whole bunch of really interesting tools for it. Like I said, I've seen ads, I've never used it, but there's one where you can if it's an online process, of course, you can record yourself just like this doing it, and it'll create snapshots of every step that you take. Those are all great.
Some other tools would be like Asana or Trello or Monday.com.
Yep.
These are project management. Slack even. Um,
And
er,
those are great about the checks and balances too, because you can create a process and then assign it to somebody and they get an email or however you guys decide to do that.
yeah.
And they can check it off when they're done, or if they're having an issue, they can write a message back. So those are great.
Mhm.
Um, we did use another one, Traction by Gino Wickman, is a book that talks a lot about processing, and he actually built an app just for it.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, it was expensive, but it was cool. Um, then once you get it all into the system, once again, clean it, make sure that it's actionable steps. Remember, processing and branding both are all about repetition and consistency. So make sure it's actions that you're actually going to keep up with. And a lot of making this worthwhile is your determination to do it and making sure that you're holding yourself accountable. And then once you do that, you can start creating automated routines and tasks, whether that's as simple as setting yourself a reminder. I have to set my, when I was in sales, we had to make 100 phone calls a day, and I had reminders set for specific hours of the day. So I knew that I had to make like 10 calls an hour to hit that. That doesn't math out. 12 calls an hour to hit that. And so every hour it would remind me, okay, you're supposed to be at 12 calls, you're supposed to be at 24 calls, you're supposed to be at 36. Or it can be a lot more complicated with, like Asana or what was the other one you just said? Slack, where you have to check the box to say you've done it, or whatever that routine looks like. Just make sure there's checks and balances to make sure that everything's getting done when it's supposed to get done.
Well, and that's not to say when you put this all online and have put it into an online tool, that maybe you see further redundancy. It's like, let's test it, see if this truly is the way we do it. Where is it causing friction? And then let's refine it. Like, this isn't something that's always going to be set in stone. This is something that maybe as people change, as seasons change, or as your product changes, like you're gonna have to refine this and tweak it a little bit, and that's okay. But the fact that you even have a process with which to start at is huge.
Yes. And that brought up a thought. Six Sigma is something that gets joked
Yeah.
around a lot. Six Sigma, this is all that it is. It's creating the process, making sure everything's in line with Six Sigma processing.
Yeah.
And it can get so granular as how many steps are you taking from one place to another.
Mhm.
Quite literally, like if you're in a factory, do you have to take 3 or 4 steps to get to the next space? And they will change processes to cut down that amount of time. So
When I first heard about Six Sigma and there's different belt colors, I was like, is there new karate? Like new like martial arts? Like what is this? Oh, no, it's business process related. Okay.
was it 30
And
Rock, right? Where he's always bragging about being a double black belt Six Sigma.
yeah.
Uh, all right. Okay, so now we've created our simple process using sticky notes. We've put it into an online system so we can share it. And Mindy, you'll have to help more on this than uh, you'll have to help me with this because I don't do HR. I don't manage people. I don't want to. I'm not good at it, clearly. So once you do that, then you can document the process so everybody understands what's going on. Mindy, how does everybody having clarity around the process help from a managerial perspective?
I mean, it helps significantly. But the biggest problem I see is that they've created it and they've documented it and defined who owns it, but they've never communicated it. Right. So this has got to be something that you communicate. And if you're a solopreneur, like communicate it with a trusted partner, or if you have like a board of directors that is like your sounding board, share it with them and have them touch base with you because you got to make certain that you are following, I mean, as a solopreneur, I've got to make sure certain that I'm following the processes I've put in place. Otherwise, my business isn't thriving as it could.
Right.
And so, from an HR perspective, like you want your people to be following the process and under that way you're getting feedback of where it's breaking down or how it can be refined. Because if you've made 10 steps that could really be done in five, like, did you understand the work that they do? Going back to that, like the process that you've outlined is, 2 years old, not what it is currently, and utilizing the tools that they do use today.
Right.
So the biggest, caveats that I see is it's not communicated, and then maybe you don't necessarily understand it,
Right.
what their job is.
Exactly. And that's a great segue to the next point of define who owns each step and when it happens. So make sure that they take responsibility, take ownership of that step, and how are they communicating when that process is done,
Yeah.
or how are they moving it to the next step of the process?
Yeah, but this kind of helps you too I mean, I believe in marketing, we talked a little bit about guardrails.
Mhm.
Um, that same word applies to this.
Yes.
Or maybe the better phrase is stay in your lane, right? Like who's getting outside of their defined job description,
Right.
where they shouldn't be, and then they're coming back to you going, I don't have enough time. And it's like, well, that's because you're doing Sally's job over here and not yours. So
Right.
can you just focus on getting your job done and not that of running the company, sort of a thing, because that happens to a
Or why
lot.
is Sally not getting it done?
Yeah, that happens to a lot of, early companies,
Yep. Exactly.
startups.
Then turn your routine tasks into checklists or templates. Like I said, we were having an issue with not getting the bathrooms clean, so we created a checklist to make sure it was getting done. So if something happened where I walked in and the bathroom wasn't clean, I can go see whose responsibility it was. Not necessarily to crack down on them, to crack the whip, but maybe there was another issue. Maybe we've overloaded them and they didn't have time to clean it, or they didn't have the right tools, or some whatever it is. Then you can start identifying further problems.
But I mean, one of those problems might be like they think they're above doing a task or whatever.
That was usually it.
Or, I mean, today, gender roles are still a big play in business. You've got your whole DEI stuff, and I mean, it's real. I'm part of a women in auto care group that is leaders and aspiring leaders, and they're like, just because you're the only woman in the room doesn't mean you're the one getting the coffee or taking the notes or anything like that. And that's large companies, that is very real. But I mean, consider it too for your smaller company because that mentality is all across the board.
Never thought about using this to mitigate a potential lawsuit.
Yeah.
All right. How many? Is it always a female cleaning the bathroom? Maybe we need to refine our process on who gets to clean the bathroom. How do we pick that? So,
Everybody gets a turn.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That's a very good point. Then once you define who owns the task, then you want to automate and delegate what repeats. So you want to make sure that once it goes somewhere, it's being checked off on. Like I said, in banking, we had to have a lot of redundancy where I would create a credit memo, but then like three people had to check off on it before it moved on. Yes, it was redundant, and I said cut out redundancy, but that was something that was put in place to make sure that everybody was staying above board. Not and so it while it cost more money, it actually saved us money in the long run because we could, if we were ever audited, we could go back and say, yeah, we didn't do anything shady because these people also checked off on it.
Mhm. But I think back a little bit about the delegate, what repeats. I mean, definitely automate where you can, but sometimes it can't be automated. And so you need to delegate it to the people where that's their strong suit and not somebody that is the last thing that they want to do because then your productivity goes way down because They don't feel like they're being valued for what the job that they do. They hate doing what they're doing, right?
Mhm.
So you got to make sure you have the right people in the right seats.
Yeah. That's a very, by the way, that's another one of Gino Wickman's concepts.
Yeah.
Make sure that, what is it? Make sure you have the right people on the right bus
Hmm.
and make sure they're in the right seats. And
Yeah.
you're exactly right. And if you go through this and you realize that there is somebody who, like you said, maybe doesn't have the capability of getting that done, you
Mhm.
can use it. You can do what I did with my manager and take their tasks, the tasks they like and don't like, and either offset them or maybe it's just not the right person, right? I think I just repeated what you said and didn't really add anything,
But
but
at the same time, if there's jobs that we, as the owner of the company, love to do and we thrive in doing them, I don't want to say delegate those unless it's just becoming such a bottleneck for your company, but hold on to those. Like that's the reason that you started the company in the first place, right? Like you love a component about your business. So keep that and delegate the other stuff. Like if you hate bookkeeping, get a bookkeeper. Like, and I think we'll discuss that next week, or in the finance and accounting one. But like, if you don't enjoy the marketing and the social media component, delegate that off. Like,
yep.
there's people out there that thrive in that. So
Hmm.
hire them, delegate it.
Right, exactly. Then you want to review and refine. This says weekly. I think it depends on the process that you're looking at as to how often it needs to be refined. Um, the point is, you want to constantly be checking to make sure everything's working correctly. Because, like I said, maybe you missed a small step that says send, or maybe it's maybe there's a new technology out that can fix that problem or something. So it's always evolving,
Yeah.
but you
I
want to
would,
make sure you stay consistent with what you're doing.
yeah, I would say probably a good best practice would be to review it quarterly. Because then you've kind of established, okay, we've got some time here to understand, unless it's just created, a huge fire, then, oh, let's look at this right now. Like we got to
Right.
figure out this process right now.
Well,
But
there's
we need to give some time to figure out like making sure all the wheels are spinning on the right cogs and all of that.
and one thing I wish I would have thought about to put in here. There's processes that happen on a daily basis. There's processes that happen on a weekly basis, monthly, quarterly, annually. So you can gauge it based on that too. Of this is a process that we have to do once a year. You still want to make sure it's front and center because maybe there's things that bleed into that annual process that you can backtrack, you can do the reverse math on and figure out how to make it less complicated that one time a year you've got to do it.
Yeah. And I think that's where, and when we get into the finance and accounting piece, I think that's where your financial advisor or your CPA or tax advisor, whatever, they'll help you identify those larger annual and quarterly ones to make sure that you're paying your state sales tax, or you're paying the IRS as you should, and all of those things.
I worked with a guy one time who, to be a jackass, put all of his receipts under R for receipt
Oh my God.
instead of like the account that they went in.
Uh, yay.
Yeah. See, had we had the checks and balances in there to say, did this go into the right account?
No, it did not. Yeah.
All right. So I think that gives everybody a good start to it. Again, there are people, I think I've said this in every chapter, there are people that make a lot of money just doing this. So don't be so overwhelmed with it that you can't think straight. Understand that it is something very difficult, it is time consuming, and there are professionals out there that can help you do it. Whether that's one of us, there's a lot of other consultants that do this on a regular basis, there's AI tools that can help. So if you're running into issues, please ask a question.
Yeah, exactly.
Any final thoughts?
No, I don't think so. This has been good. I mean, I know this is where you and I both work a lot in is processes. Mine more so is on the implementation side, whereas Rob, yours is not. Which
More on
you,
the finance and accounting side, yes.
you've said that repeatedly. And so, um, if you need a partner to brainstorm with, we're both available. Or if you, hopefully any of you would be willing to, that's watching this, would be willing to share in our group discussion and just throw out the question, because I guarantee somebody has that same question and they're just not wanting to ask it, but please do. Like that's the
Right.
only way we help everybody become better business owners.
I don't like the question, the term or the term. There are no stupid questions because there definitely are. But this isn't the time to be worried about that. Just
Yeah,
get
yeah.
it out and I'll tell you you're stupid and we'll move on. I mean,
Clayton, I think, has repeatedly said, we don't know what we don't know. And
exactly.
so if you're not asking the question, then you can't know. You can't, you're not learning to become better and a stronger business owner. So
I
um,
wouldn't actually call anybody stupid, but
I know. But too, if you have questions and don't feel comfortable asking them in the group, respond to the email. Maybe don't reply all. Like send it to Clayton, myself, and Rob, and we can address that in the group meeting and just say we had a question come through. So to prevent Rob from saying, "Hey, you're stupid," not that he would do that, but
hopefully
if
not to
that,
your face.
yeah, if that makes you more comfortable, then please do that.
Yep.
We're here to help you.
All right. I think that wraps that one up.
All
If I can
right. Thank
figure out how to
you.
end it.